Hey listeners, it's Alex, your host of EOA, Entrepreneurs of Asia, the show where we talk to founders, investors, and entrepreneurs impacting the startup scene here in Asia and abroad. This week, we continue the theme of talking to my good friends who are global by nature. Rajan Devnath is co-founder of a venture called NEVO, which is a venture which we are not entirely sure what it is yet. What does that mean? Well, we'll find out later. Previously, Raj was part of the founding team of Easy Taxi Philippines, and afterwards, he successfully sold one of his businesses called Pillows in Space in the Philippines. After his first exit, he tried to build a series of other ventures too, and is continuing this trend today. Despite his extensive experience in venture building, he is originally a hardcore telecommunications engineer by trade who worked for global companies such as Huawei in India. In this episode, we discuss a lot of issues around China and what the tech scene is like in China and living in China. Raj previously was part of the senior leadership of a well-known startup based in San Francisco called The Studio and was seconded to China for the past few years. We get to dig into big Chinese tech companies, the potential of 5G, India versus China, the founder journey, and how to develop startup ideas. This was a very enjoyable session for me, and I hope you enjoy it too. Let's dive right in. Rajan, welcome to the show. How are you, my friend?
Hey, good, very good. I'm loving the winters here, actually.
Yes, you wanted to do this call early in the morning, right? So are you a morning person or?
Yeah, I wake up at 5:36 these days, man. Like it's
when did this start to happen?
Actually, it happened when after my last venture I was working with, a studio, I went on a 3-month break, travel around China, and that kind of like got me into the rhythm of like waking up 6 a.m. in the morning. And I really started liking it. It just changes my whole day. It makes it so much more productive. And I don't think I want to change that.
What do you need to do to prepare yourself to wake up so early? Like what's
That's
the process?
That's a very good question.
Yeah, right?
That's a very good question. Yeah. I mean, to create a habit, because it's my habit now, you need to like change the cue. So one thing I noticed was after 8 p.m., I used to like be on my phone a lot. I used to reply to text messages after 8 p.m. and it creates like a stress in your mind. And you tend to like, has he replied or not? So I don't respond after 8 p.m. That's one. Second, I prepare myself mentally that 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. is when I have to be home. So I plan my day for 9 p.m. So that puts me in the like a mindset that 9 p.m. is my sleeping time. And within 1 hour, I read a bit and all, and then I'm able to sleep. So these two like have helped a lot. Yeah.
So I mean, it's like, it's setting the mental state in advance that you have to force your routine early. So then one, your mind is there. Then two is just following through. And then what time are you sleeping by?
I sleep by 10:30. Yeah.
Okay.
One thing I've also changed is what I really compromise on sleep. Like even if I have to cut down whatever, 8 hours is something I'll always get now. I still get 7.5 or 8. So yeah, never compromising on it.
Okay. So two things about that. How would you contrast yourself? I mean, would you still say the same thing if you were in your early 20s when we were at Rocket Internet building Easy Taxi? Or is that something like a rite of passage? Like, I mean, I feel like everyone hits 30 and they're like, yeah, I need to sleep, because I mean, it's true. But do you think that makes sense to apply that advice for young people?
No, I think I mean every person is different. I think when you're in your 20s, you should just do don't just do like crazy stuff, because I actually like remembering those things when I slept 3 hours, 4 hours, 2 hours. It's just good story to remember, right? And end of the day, it's all about memories. So and the thing is, your body has way more tolerance when you're super young. So just take advantage of your tolerance.
True.
So it's okay. It's okay. Sleep less. It's okay. If you're passionate
when you're younger, sleep less. But I think if you're not cognizant by the time you hit your late 20s and 30s, it's going to hit you really hard. And then you start to see a cognitive decline and your performance. And I do probably think by the time you hit your 30s, like you said, you have to find this better balance and routine, right?
Yeah, for sure. I also think like every person is different. Like it's more about like I'm being more mindful of how I do things. So I have seen people performing okay with like 6.5, 7 hours, but for me, like I want 8 hours.
I mean, it's genetics. So some people actually can do that, or maybe there's a hidden cost that they're going to pay later when they get older, right?
Probably, yeah.
Right. And I guess the second thing about that then is So you had this routine of no replying, but it's like, it sounds like you're the type of person who's very focused for work, right? So no work calls. What are your other distractions at night then? Like say, you're going to mess up. I don't think you hit your routine 100% of the time. Like you're going to bed by 10, 30 or 11, right? Yeah. But maybe sometimes what's keeping you up till 12? What are you getting distracted by? Social media, TV, movies? What habits?
Yeah, a good question. So actually, I don't do social media anymore. Thankfully, I don't enjoy sharing my private life anymore.
But you do Twitter though, right?
My Twitter, I tweet like once in, I don't know,
a few months. I think once a month at least. I think
once a month. Yeah, and it's some crazy. Yeah.
We can follow you on Devnath. How do you say your last name? Devnath.
Devnath. Yeah.
Devnath. Yeah, which is RDEVNATH.
Yes. It makes no sense because Dev means God and Nath is also a god.
In what language?
In Hindi, Indian language.
Hindi. Okay, so you're Rajan God.
God. And my first name means king.
King, the king of God of gods. I don't know, maybe it's a good name.
Yeah, epitome of whatever the best could be, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what did you have for breakfast?
Oh yeah, that's another thing I changed. So I love yogurt. So I eat a lot of yogurt and nuts, blueberries. I love making my own breakfast now. It takes 15 minutes, but I look forward to my breakfast when I wake up.
Interesting. And is this, of course, this is part of getting to a better diet, better habit, better routine. So are you the type of person that eats the same breakfast every day, or do you need to change it up?
I mean, I like changing things, but I love yogurt and nuts so much that I don't want to change it. I really like yogurt and nuts.
Have you been ordering Amazing Grace?
I have ordered like Amazing Grace before, and I think very good product. But it's just I'm trying to like make my own stuff in the morning. So
okay,
I like the process. I like the process of making my own coffee, my breakfast. It doesn't cost more than 15
it's like a ritual.
Minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, I just love it. Yeah.
But then, what does your typical breakfast say in Shenzhen, China? I mean, if you're not making it.
Oh, you mean like in generally in Shenzhen? Yeah. I would say people eat like pork buns in the morning. It depends. Like in cities, I would say like takeouts have become like a norm. So like Starbucks, it depends too. Like Shenzhen is of course a tier 1 city, so a lot of Western stuff here. But even within Shenzhen, like there's a lot of it. There are a lot of like mom and pop stores, and they sell those like buns, pork buns, and all, and some soya drinks. So people just grab and go. It's a very very rushed, very rushed city. So people don't tend to stay at home that much.
That's fascinating, because when I talk to people from China and other parts, say Shanghai or Beijing, they would say arguably Shenzhen is actually a lot slower compared to the other cities.
Actually, there's a term called Shenzhen speed, and they say there's this China speed and then there's Shenzhen speed. Shenzhen speed,
so it's faster.
It's way faster. People. Shenzhen has grown it's undoubtedly like it has grown like the fastest in any of the Chinese cities. It's top 3 cities in terms of GDP and everything. So and in only 50 years, it completed 50 years this year, while Shanghai and all has been there for like 200 years now. So there's no doubting. The other thing is
probably a few hundred or thousands a year, maybe, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So you were saying?
No, I was just saying like Shenzhen is not even like people say Shenzhen is not a family city because life is so fast here. While Shanghai and Beijing is way more better for families and to raise kids and all.
I remember why I said that, because I had once met a Grab driver, and he was a chef in Shenzhen for I think like more than a decade, and I think his life maybe was slow. That's why he felt it was probably a good pace. Maybe it's different for people not working in the scene, which I guess is very tech centric, right?
Probably. Also depends on the time. I don't know when he was working. In last 10 years, I think like Shenzhen has become crazy in a good way. Like I like the speed here. I really like the city.
So it's like a tier 1 big metropolis. fast pace, has its own ecosystem, growing very fast.
Yeah, and if you're in tech, like all the new tech stuff gets implemented here by the government, and also it's like a heaven to be in that sense. Yeah.
And how long have you been in Shenzhen by now?
I've spent 1.5 years. Yeah.
Is it easy for foreigners to stay?
I think Shenzhen is definitely like less international compared to Shanghai or Beijing, but like even the people within here are actually very open because it's an immigrant city. So you get accepted pretty fast, even though the language might be a bit of a barrier there. So if you're a local from China, it's like no brainer. Even if you're international, it's actually easy. It's not that difficult.
So I mean, you can pretty much operate on English anywhere you go then.
I would say 80% of the, like if Shanghai is 95, here 80%. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, well, as a tourist, I would imagine like Shanghai not being an issue. Like it's probably 100% you're fine. Probably very few situations, like you said, probably 95%, like a few situations where you're going to need Chinese. But I mean, man, that's pretty crazy. So 80%, like you can actually live, get around, work, and conduct business in English.
Work, if you're working in tech, like because Shenzhen has a long history and still is a manufacturing. So if you're more on the supplier side of things, of course you need Mandarin.
That's true.
But if you're on the front end, like Shenzhen is a hub for like cross-border business, and also they speak English. Yes.
Okay, so then you've had no problems, and I guess are you picking up Chinese then?
Yeah, I am. I would only add, I suck at languages in general. So I started taking Mandarin classes back in February. Then I had to give it up because of work, and I also am not a good student. But yeah, I am. I am slower than what ideal would be.
You know what the traditional advice is on how to learn a language, right?
You speak with the locals. You get a girlfriend, a Chinese girlfriend. Unfortunately, the girl I was dating, she was American Chinese, so her English was better. So she spoke English. Yeah, but then that's why she's an ex now. So we'll see.
That's why, because you couldn't learn Chinese fast. No one's going to judge you, hopefully. Okay, so a little bit about you. Intros. You studied engineering, and you actually started your career as an engineer.
Yeah.
How much of that exists and is a part of you now?
I would say it's a very interesting question. So I started off being a pure engineer, and then I moved into like completely non-technical. I am actually going back to a little bit of technical side now, and I'm starting to enjoy it more.
But what kind of engineering did you study and work as?
Yeah, so I did electronics and communication engineering.
Well, it's pretty hardcore.
Yeah, it's like super hardcore. It was one of the toughest to get in. My school was actually quite good too. So and then I worked for telecom. I was a network engineer, same as my field.
Okay.
Worked for Huawei for a couple of years, 2 years, almost 2 years.
Before it was big.
Before it was
like this massive political machine that causes problems with the world, right? Or at least, from the Western perspective, at least. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, it's funny, but when I joined Huawei, they used to be like the third biggest telecom after Ericsson. Yeah, no, globally.
Globally, okay.
Yeah.
Wow, so back then they were big.
Yeah, they were already big. So they were globally
back in 2009. Okay.
Yeah. So number one used to be Ericsson, then Nokia, Siemens, and Huawei was number 3. But when I left in 2011, they were number 1. So imagine the 2 years. Imagine the 2 years. That was like crazy. And I loved it. It was really good. Yeah.
I mean, like, back then, even being in Southeast Asia for 10 years, I didn't realize the scope of how massive it was. And of course, I guess being number 3, then number 1 in the world, of course, the biggest base in growth is from China, obviously. But then it means they're also reaching internationally within those 2-year period, right?
Yeah. Their biggest market was biggest growth came from Africa and Europe.
Part of the external expansion plan. That probably makes a lot of sense. But what exactly was your job then as a network engineer and an engineer who studied electronics and communications?
Yeah, so I studied telecom. So I was basically working on the Huawei telecom network on the 4G. Back then, in the outside of China, it was 4G network that they were implementing. So I was working on MPLS, BTS, basically all these network technologies. BTS are your towers that you see,
You got to help.
Yeah. MPLS is a technology through which how the communication wave, the telecom communication wave happens. It's basically a routing technology. And back then it was one of the core. So yeah, I mean, I was working on their 4G network basically.
4G,
so you work with you work with a lot of like clients. I was like Vodafone. You're basically a middle person working with the Vodafone, implementing like Huawei's network on Vodafone's communication. So yeah, that's what.
And speaking of that, what is your take on 5G now?
I think for the masses, it's an incremental value for the masses, but for business and for, let's say, a certain part of customers, like it does help a lot on specific scenarios, 5G overall. But I think 4G is good enough for masses globally.
I mean, for where the current technology is, but I mean, I was seeing kind of like a brother-in-law showing me his download speed in Australia. It's like 200 megs down on a mobile phone. I have to imagine this is like typical home internet for not so good countries like America, probably. I mean, the standard here is like, half a gig or a gig is the standard now, right? For download speeds. And then I could imagine on your mobile, like eventually you don't even need the home internet anymore. You don't need the wires and cables. It unlocks like probably gaming is going to be the first thing that probably takes advantage, right? It unlocks so many possibilities of so much bandwidth of data. I mean, also probably Internet of Things, wearables, right? Like,
exactly.
There's so much that could take advantage of this now.
Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest advantage is actually in IoT, because the way 5G works is it advantages the IoT a lot more. The only thing is wearables or IoT in general, it hasn't become a mainstream yet. So that's why I was saying like the biggest value it gives, it like in a couple of years, yes, 5G will add a lot of value. In terms of download speed, like if you think like, yes, gaming is definitely, but even within gaming is the most high-end graphics one. That's where it adds most value. But most of the gaming can actually work on 4G. And actually 4G has different types as well. There's LTE 4G, which is like the higher art. And most of the countries now have LTE. So the step up from LTE to 5G in terms of what we use on a day-to-day is fine, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, for what we currently have, I'm just kind of curious to see. I mean, like the thing is, we don't know. And what this like massive potential could unlock is just the next wave of, I don't know, AR, VR, I don't know. And is there anything interesting from a Shenzhen perspective that you're seeing? Well, I mean, aside from 5G, maybe 5G or what's the buzz in Shenzhen now?
Definitely IoT. Like you see, like Xiaomi has actually been at the forefront of going like mass in IoT. Huawei is actually making good strides. DJI already like doing good in drones. They are going. So IoT is definitely something like they all are like it's quite. And in fact, it's at the forefront like globally.
Yeah, I mean, from a Xiaomi perspective, like I know like there are some diehard customers here in Malaysia, like their whole house is decked out from Xiaomi from top to bottom, like their TV, the fridge, the lights, the phone, the computer monitors, like everything. I mean, and like what they do is like, I think, I don't know how they're taking advantage, maybe because they have the economies of scale, but the pricing, no one can beat it for the hardware that they're producing, right? So
Xiaomi's business model is very interesting. Like, I don't know if I should talk detail about it, but they started off doing everything themselves. Okay, so Xiaomi actually started off doing everything themselves, basically like an OEM, but eventually they realized they can do everything themselves. So actually a lot of Xiaomi products are not Xiaomi products. So it's basically the factories it's the factories who they treat them as startups, and Xiaomi incubates them and then releases the product. And it depends on what kind of product it is, but most of the time you will see like an M logo. It's one of the Xiaomi's portfolio, so-called startup factory. And if something does well, then they bring it under their portfolio. So they are kind of being an incubator for startups, funding them, like taking advantage of their network and all.
I mean, I didn't realize that model exists. How does it work? Aside from capital, I guess capital would be a big constraint for manufacturing. What is it? Process operations? They bringing why would I want to be incubated by Xiaomi?
Yeah, good question. So actually, the biggest challenge for a lot of these factories are market reach. Like everybody's starting from ground zero. Yeah, how do they get the distribution, reach the market? So Xiaomi has a good brand, like a good standard of quality, I would say, and Xiaomi has their own operations process in order to like how they select a brand and all, and they of course like optimize the backend ops, but the biggest value is on the customer side.
Okay, so if I'm like a manufacturer of a niche, I go to Xiaomi, then they basically help me scale it up, and then they'll invest and probably acquire if it's good.
Yes, they don't acquire more than 49% because they want the factory to run it as a long term themselves. Like just create your own ideas, create your own thing. Their policy is not to take majority shareholder.
Who's the biggest competitor or up and coming threat to Xiaomi then?
I think the biggest competitor are a lot of these factories who are doing well on Amazon and all these e-commerce store, and they have a good supply chain already. So that's on a high level, like that's the biggest competitor. But if I talk about individual brand, I would say Anchor. Anchor is the competitor. Anchor is even trying to like bring these Chinese companies to like abroad. Then there are like a lot of brands building their in-house products as well. Like you have Oppo, OnePlus, of course, Huawei is targeting the high-end market. So there's competition for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Definitely was competition. So let's talk about you kind of left engineering and then you joined Rocket Internet. What made you want to leave engineering and start on this path of, I guess, would this be your first experience in entrepreneurship, or did you do something beforehand?
Yeah, so I was actually I didn't put it in my profile, but not a lot of people know this, but I was actually in consulting for a couple of months. I was working for Mahindra Group is like pretty big in India. They're second largest conglomerate, so they have a consulting arm. Okay. So I was in there. They used to call us GLC, Global Leadership Cadre. So I was working on Cisco. Basically the Cisco partnership of Mahindra. So Mahindra makes like a lot of, like they make cars, they have hospitals, they have like everything. And they also have telecom, they work with telecom. So I was working on the network side with Cisco for Mahindra Group. It was good and nice, fancy, but I realized it wasn't for me. It was just too many meetings and too much bullshit, to be honest, to get things done. It was a good company, like hired good people and all, but stuff just don't get done, and you don't get the sense of like accomplishments and all. So I was pretty sure I wanted to be in startups. Even when I was at Huawei, even though I loved it, I always knew I wanted to eventually land up in a startup. So yeah, I started applying everywhere. I started to see the growth of Southeast Asia quite a bit. And yeah, I was applying to Southeast Asia. Mostly I got some interviews, and yeah, I got in touch with someone in Rocket Internet and went through that process. And yeah, it was a good experience.
How did you know you wanted to do entrepreneurship then? I mean, you're an engineer and you worked in communications, big companies. Of course, I mean, like, I think everyone who has had some exposure to consulting, at least maybe because my bubbles, my network is, in a bubble, but like everyone gets disenchanted with consulting, right? And then there's no impact. I need to do something in my life that's more meaningful. But, before consulting, you said you knew you wanted to do entrepreneurship. What was it?
So, when you're young, you're kind of stupid. I felt I liked...
That's probably true.
Yeah, so I started reading TechCrunch when I was probably in my 9th grade. And it's kind of like a stupid mentality. I loved reading it. And for me, it was like startups, always motivated by it. I got no clue, okay, what does it really take? But I knew I wanted to do it. It's a stupid aspiration in that sense, which turned out to be good in my case. I'm really glad I did that. I think I would say I knew what I didn't like more than what I really liked. And I was clear that I did not like meetings. I liked being on the ground, like talking to people, I did something in sales as well, for a brief period after Huawei, and I loved it. Even though it was not a real startup experience, I liked it more. So yeah, I mean, I think combination of me reading all these and really liking all that, and then knowing that meetings and all are not for me. I PowerPoint presentations and that crap. Yeah,
there's a lot to unpack there, right? I mean, I don't think it's so stupid, right? When you're, I mean, especially for entrepreneurship, I think that when you're young, that naivety is extremely important. Everyone talks about that all the time, right? Like, if you know too much, you're just not going to do it. Like right now, we're old and jaded. Right?
Exactly.
We're probably not going to do a lot of things where where we could break barriers because we're naive about it, which which is an important thing to unlearn and probably break through going forward, right? But I think it wasn't so stupid to dream. And then I guess the thing I want to ask about that is like, where in India were you in 9th grade?
I was in Delhi.
Delhi. So you're actually in New Delhi.
I pretty much grew up in Delhi. I spent whole life in, not whole life, but until I was in India, I spent in Delhi. Yeah, my youth.
Is this common for the youth in high school around that age to be reading TechCrunch, or were you like the?
No, I was the only one.
You were the only one.
I would add, I was always like, I like tinkering with stuff. Even when I was like 4th and 5th grade, I remember I was the only one, not even 4th, I think I was in my 2nd grade. I was the only one in my whole community who had a computer back then.
How come?
Yeah, I don't know, back in, maybe India was not there yet. Which year was this?
New Delhi is such a wealthy city, right?
It is, but it wasn't. Okay.
It isn't. I understand what you mean. It's just so big. Yeah. How many people are in New Delhi?
I don't remember now, to be honest. It's embarrassing, but
this is your home, my friend.
Maybe 25 million, maybe 35 million. I don't know.
22 million, about 22 million.
Okay,
million.
Wasn't that bad? Oh yeah.
I mean, that's a sizable country in itself, I guess. So I guess there has to be a wide disparity and gap. So you were young, you were interested in tech, the naivety helped you. And then I guess, like you said, you had a very powerful filter, which is a very useful model. If you don't know how to iterate, it's one way to do it. You avoid the things, you know what to say no to. And then you can be open to the other opportunities. And that's kind of how, I guess that's how you probably transition to Rocket. How did it come onto your radar to apply to Easy Taxi back in the day?
Rocket was Rocket was the place to be when I was applying. Yeah, it was like back in 2013. It was like everywhere. Like it was like applying for McKinsey if you want to do consulting. So of course that was my main goal to go into. Because I mean, Uber and all has good brand and all, but back then Uber wasn't big in Southeast Asia. They hadn't even like entered like most cities back then.
Correct.
In 2013. Yeah. So Rocket was definitely, and I started. Of course, I started through my friends asking for referrals, but I started reaching out directly to people in LinkedIn, and and actually I reached out to June. And
how'd you come across his profile?
I guess I knew I wanted to be in Asia, and like June's profile, was I found it easily. Maybe because he was
very active on LinkedIn.
Yeah. And the funny thing was he responded right away. Like people would take like 3 days, 2 days.
Yeah.
I messaged him. He was like, okay, let's get on a call. He added my Skype and we just went on a call, and he gave me some brain teasers, some questions, and
we probably copied the Uber test, I think.
So that was a written test as well. Yeah, he gave me a written test later on as well. Yeah, I was stupid to not copy it. I didn't know it's an Uber question. It's an Uber. Yeah.
So for the people who don't know, June was our guest on episode 2. He shares some very interesting rocket stories, and he had a very interesting path of where he is now. But we also had Sikho on the show, which was working with June directly in Malaysia. And Sikho, like you said, is fast. He went in for it. He got called the same day he applied. He was forced to come in the same day. He started working the same day. So
wow.
Right. So this is
This is very kind of rocket style, very June style actually as well, like the fast, high impact. Yeah. And that's why I guess, Rocket spread so fast around the region. That was the culture that the Samware brothers brought to the table, the execution. And one thing they focused on, at least very early on, which I think not many people got, was the laser focus on hiring, and doing that very well, which I guess you got the brunt of it. So I guess you passed the test, and then what they said, you look like a Filipino, we're going to send you to the Philippines, or what happened?
I think he was thinking between Jakarta, Indonesia, and Philippines. But in Indonesia, there was this girl.
Girl.
Usman,
okay.
And there was some girl there already. And then first I was supposed to be there, and then he got in that girl, and then he was like, okay, you to Philippines. And in Philippines, they needed a lot of help on drivers. I don't know, during our interview, we talked a lot about drivers and all.
Yeah. Rideshare in Philippines, man, it's a different world. It was very, from the stories I heard, man, it's very challenging, and the quality of drivers was very different from the other parts of the region. So,
for sure, yeah.
What was your biggest takeaway from Rideshare then?
I loved it. To be honest, still I would say my best memories since I started working are from those days. My biggest take. Man, you gotta do crazy stuff. We had a very clear end goal. No matter what it takes, no matter what the society thinks, what people think, just do it. Like even like going to taxi garages in unsafe regions, like when you're like in your first day in your in a new like a new country, like it was really, really good. Like stuff, like a lot of stuff we did was in the borderline of like crossing the what's legal and what's not legal. So definitely like really remember those days. And I think it also helped a lot because we had a strong competitor, Grab, and then Uber came after later on as well. That like pushes you even more to like achieve things.
Yeah. So basically it helps form your early foundation, I guess, for the rest of your venture career, startup career, right?
Yeah.
And then I guess after you left, you went to Etobi?
Etobi, yeah.
Etobi, which was, I think back then, a logistics company that's not around anymore, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. So it was a last mile delivery venture, and then it pivoted to bank services for SMEs on financial services. And then now I think it's not there anymore, yeah.
Oh, it's not, okay, so it's completely gone now, actually.
I think it's kind of floating there. I don't know. I didn't keep up with it. Yeah.
I mean, it's very fascinating if you watch the trends, right? Like we were at the golden age peak of rideshare, even before it all kicked off globally, right? And then the next hot thing you saw was logistics, right? And I think everyone kind of piled in logistics. To a degree, there's only a few players that started that time who are surviving. I don't know, like Ninja Van, a few other logistics guys. Lala Move, that's Lala Move, of course. Yeah, like they were starting around that time too, but I think they were already quite successful in China at that point.
Yes,
they had a good name in China. At least they weren't number one, but they were definitely rising fast. And then of course, later on, all the platform players are in logistics, Gojek, Grab, right? It's part of their network effect and what they took advantage of.
Exactly.
And at the same time, though, at that time you launched Airbnb type company. I remember. The Pillows in Space.
Yeah. So Pillow and Space. Yeah. So actually towards the end, I worked there, Etobi, I worked there for about 2 years. And then when things started to get very competitive, like you said, like Gojek launched the same service, Grab and all. So we tried pivoting and all. And then I realized it's not going to last long. And I was already thinking about like building my own now, because this venture, I started it in Philippines. Also, like did in Indonesia as well. But I wanted to do something that I think it's really my own. And the reason I did the Airbnb one was it came out of my own experience. Like when you're in Southeast Asia, almost everyone travels around a lot because every country is like so small. And I stayed in a lot of Airbnbs, and what I realized is the consistency of the service in, let's say, a developing country in Airbnb, in any C2C model, I would say, is actually a lot worse than a developed country, let's say in US or even Singapore. So I saw an opportunity to like standardize the C2C or Airbnb market, and that's what we were doing at Pillar Space.
Yeah, and I think you got traction. You got to a point where you actually sold the company as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it sounds fancy, sold the company, but yeah, I mean, we did sell it to a real estate company. And but the main reason, we actually grew quite well. We were doing quite well. We were cash flow positive as well. From early on, I think one of my learnings from Rocket that I took it is don't spend too much money. Be very mindful of where you meant to spend your money on. And I did a good job at that. At the same time, like keeping your growth. However, when we like reached a peak, like after a point of time, it became a lot more operationally inconsistent, that I could see like as you keep scaling it, it's hard to maintain that level of standard if you do everything yourself. Unlike many ventures, because the operational touch points in a home and living space, in a travel space, or let's say in a living space, is a lot more than compared to like a ride hailing where you connect a driver and that's it, it's done. Here it's like person is staying in your apartment for like 3 days, 5 days. So it's hard to like keep up that moment. And even now, until now, nobody who has done something similar has been able to like scale it to make it like a big venture. There have been a lot of them trying to do it.
Does that mean it's not a scalable model? Because like you're trying to make a very consistent experience across fragmented supply of actual homes and hosting, right? And the unit economics probably don't scale that nicely. Is it because of that it doesn't go beyond a certain point? It's like a nice multi-million dollar business at best, or it's just people are solving it the wrong way?
I don't know if I cannot say if it's a wrong way, because I don't know what's the right way, and I don't know. I haven't seen anyone doing it, but yeah, it's probably the first one. Look, there's a company in China doing the exact same thing, Tujia. They became a unicorn, but then they stopped doing it. They've completely pivoted. They went down. Yeah. So someone who had all the cash and everything, they couldn't do it. So that tells me maybe it's not there.
Yeah, I feel that's a very Chinese thing too, right? Like all these guys use a specific idea strategy to raise money on hype. But they probably know that's not going to last long term, but they use it to get the mass and scale of the user base, and then they pivot to something more sustainable, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I mean, so, yeah. I guess. So go ahead.
Yeah. To answer your question, yeah, the reason is, imagine like a customer and a guest coming in your apartment, staying in for, let's say, 3 days, 4 days, 1 week. Yeah. There are so many touch points for an experience. The shower breaks down. Oh, the water is not flowing that well. Oh, there's something in the bed. The pillow is not nice. There's just too many operational touch points compared to a car where like, okay, I get in a car, I reach somewhere else. As long as I reach fast, clean enough, that's fine. So it's more challenging. Yes. I see
what you mean. Yeah. So like if you're comparing it to rideshare, improving quality was an early kind of value proposition for Uber, right? And then it made sense. And then we couldn't grab that advantage because we were fully focused on taxis. And I guess if you think traditionally, right, the way this is solved for this industry and space is just very capex intensive. You're a hotel brand, right? You have to have, you're probably renting a building, I guess, but then, you do all the design and stuff. It's a huge sunk cost. And then over time, then it prints cash eventually, assuming the macro picture is strong enough. And I guess, what do you think about, what do you think about this then? Do you think the correct answer has been co-living then, right? Because that, in the past few years, has been popular, but it also probably hasn't really exploded either, right? It has a lot of funding and ideas, especially like in Singapore where all the money is. Do you think there's some legs there, or also just wasting their time is just going to be capped at a smaller market?
I think it's a good cash making business, but yeah, it's end of the day, it's like running a traditional branded chain, to be honest. That's what I've seen. A lot of companies have tried to add tech into it, like adding like a community, like an online community, gamify it and all. But yeah, it's a traditional good money business. However, co-living, I definitely think is a good, regardless it's a tech or not, it's a good future forward. Of course, like people are migrating to cities, spaces are getting more expensive. much more expensive than the salaries are increasing, and also co-living makes sense, and it's becoming more connected world. So I think it makes sense for sure.
So you actually think there's more? Well, I'm not sure about tech, but there's definitely more of a community idea in co-living.
For sure. Yeah, that's a big.
Have you tried living in co-living, or you're hearing this from friends, or why do you say this?
I have lived in co-living. Yes, I have. See, the thing is, all these homes and all were traditionally made for, like, it wasn't defined for individual people at that price point, and community living actually helps you with that. So of course people are getting more connected and all, but then the second value prop you get is like it helps you reduce your price quite a lot. One of the biggest challenges for migrants to move to, like, let's say these tier 1 cities is the pricing, and community living like helps you reduce that price quite a lot.
So what you're saying is then it seems that it's targeted for at least one niche or one segment is the migrant workers. And I guess another aspect would be what, expats?
Yes, expats as well. Yeah, single people, entrepreneurs, like trying to connect with, like, by entrepreneurs, I mean like freelance entrepreneurs, like really small entrepreneurs trying to like get into like ecosystems and things like that. Yeah.
Which probably at this point has kind of been capped at the knees because of COVID and the pandemic, right? So less travelers, even probably less migrants, because a lot of the borders interstate are even closed, right?
Yes, definitely.
So I guess but I mean, like with the vaccine on the horizon, and what my friends are in travel, they're seeing bookings from December being shifted to January and almost back to half of what they saw back to normal levels. So we're expecting a really big bounce back. So we'll see if that trend continues or not, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I hope I want to start traveling in Southeast Asia soon. So.
Yeah, I'm sure. I know you're itching. Yeah. So then after Pillows in Space, you kind of exited, right? Probably something decent, but not.
Yeah.
It's enough where you're not, you're probably not saying F you to the next opportunity, but it's good enough, right? It's some changes, right?
Yeah.
And then you went through the process of probably trying to launch quite a few ideas, right? Or maybe one idea, which was initially called Salex, then which pivoted into Reach.
Yeah, so actually, yes. So that actually came out of Pillow and Space as well. Like one of the big challenges when we were doing Pillow and Space was B2B, basically building the supply side. And the Reach tried to solve that. And almost every marketplace, the biggest challenge is getting supply side. We were trying to solve that. It didn't work out. Yeah.
Yeah. So actually it was interesting because you followed pretty good advice, actually. So you had an actual pain point in something you knew really well, right? Because you were trying to build up Pillows in Space, and you found another problem while trying to build Pillows in Space, where building supply through to build a supply, then you thought like of building a platform for B2B sales and scaling that, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
How come that didn't work out then?
So yes, so it was a B2B supply for like regardless of industries, but we were targeting like SMEs because a lot of startups were focused on onboarding SMEs from fintech, restaurant startups, or delivery ventures. It did not work out because our platform was designed to like reduce the time to onboard a supplier. So it was a pay per reply platform to acquire businesses. Yeah. And the payment wasn't like actual payment. It used to go as credits to them, which they could reuse to acquire others. So we were trying to building that credit community system. And what we realized eventually was people actually felt the process of building that relationship with those supply side actually is really valuable. And if you do like there's no quick fix into it. Like, okay, you click and then you onboard someone. That way of doing thing was not correct. And there were like a lot of smaller reasons too, like the awkwardness around these things. So yeah, I would say like it was more about the human reason why it didn't work out, like how humans interact with each other.
Basically, if you're trying to build a marketplace on supply side, especially ones like Uber, it requires a lot of high interaction and it's not as scalable, which is why we were on the ground going one-to-one a lot, I guess. So I guess in your understanding and knowledge of the space, no one has really kind of solved a good platform that can scale supply side as a SaaS platform.
No, none. There's none. There's one company in Germany. They were doing pretty well, but then they fell flat afterwards. Like they raised, I think they went Series B, and they went flat afterwards.
Okay, and then so from there, I think you worked on that for quite a long time, right? Like 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years.
Yeah. So then I guess you're a little bit burned out from that. Then I think we talked back at that point in time. Then you were applying to work for this company, and it was also a marketplace, but also kind of in fashion and supply chain, right?
Yeah.
Which was eventually became the studio.
Yes. So like a decent sized company. It wasn't a small startup.
Yeah.
So I applied, and I joined. Actually, I joined them to lead their growth side. I joined as a VP of growth first. So I moved to San Francisco, growing their customer side of things, but it was more about like launching new ways to get more customers than like just digital marketing or partnerships. So we launched a couple of ideas to get to onboard like businesses or customers at scale. One of them worked out pretty well, and after that, if you want me to talk about like how I moved back from San Francisco to Shenzhen, I'm happy to share that as well.
Well, but so before we move forward, what exactly is the studio?
Okay. Yeah. So Studio is it's an on-demand manufacturing platform. And basically they specialize on low MOQ. MOQ means like minimum order quantities. Minimum order quantities for SME, small to large businesses in US. We are actually Studio is the largest patch making company and caps and all, like it's decent size. So the problem it was solving is a lot of these businesses, they want to make their own merchandising, and they have a really hard time finding factories to create like small MOQ orders for them. And it's a long process, even if they're able to find it. So with Studio, like everything was tech actually. Everything happened through the platform, and everything, whole design, whole order dispatchment, placement used to happen through our platform. And people could, like the businesses could place even 10 orders, 50 orders, 30 orders.
Oh, so small.
And we have, really small orders. I mean, I'm not saying people did 50 orders. I'm just telling you like 30 is the minimum, but people would place like 300, 400, where the industry average is like 10,000, 50,000 orders. Yeah. So our customers were like small Instagram to like big, even Nike and like Google and all, like they were our customers as well. Google, Uber, Stanford and all, like for their merchandising. So I mean, that's what the company did. I started with customer side and then moved on to the operation side.
So customer side would be onboarding all the people who need so that the niche was you started in cornering like merchandising essentially for corporates. So when you say customers, you had to basically find customers who needed these kind of products for merchandising and had a pain point where they had no way to get small MOQs based out of China.
Yes, I would only add me specifically. My role was more about launching new initiatives within the company that helps them grow more sales. So they already had a head of sales already. So like, I'll give you an example. One of the things we launched was like just sending free samples to like influencers and let them see like if they like it, and then they promote it, and then they can order more. So that was one of the initiatives we launched. So things like these that can help them scale faster. Yeah.
In a sense, what I'm hearing is they had a good product market fit. They had a channel that was working. They kept doubling down on that, but they were looking to probably expand their marketing horizon, get more channels to continue growth. And your goal was probably to optimize and test and control the experiments to kind of unlock more growth for more customers at first. At least when you moved to San Francisco.
Yeah.
How long were you in San Francisco?
Not long, actually. Less than a year. Yeah, less than a year.
Is it as bad as everyone says?
It's. I mean, it has a lot of good things about it. Overall, I liked it actually. But I liked it. I mean,
probably because you were passing through. But like, I really don't get this conception of what I see on Twitter and read in the media. The drug problem, the homelessness, the incompetence of government, and when I visited, I could see small elements, but also I was just visiting through, right? So, but like I just like, I don't know, like, I'm not too sure if people are just complaining about, like, it's an ivory tower problem, right? Like, you're in this great city, things are looking pretty good. Of course, they're very expensive. There is inequality. But I mean, like, I would have to imagine around the world, there's way more incompetent governments and worse situations. I don't know. You're from India. You got to tell me, like, that's a stereotype that we hear about certain cities, right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. No, you're absolutely right. I think a lot of things we hear about San Francisco or other cities is those are, to be honest, first world problems. They're not real problems.
All right.
So yeah, I liked it actually. It was a good experience to be there. Yeah.
Yeah. So you actually got to work in the Valley, and the co-founding team, good, solid, doing something correct.
Yes, the CEO is good. I had a good time there. Yes.
Yeah. And then I guess they moved you to Shenzhen.
Yeah. So actually, during this time, also what also happened was the guy who was running our Shenzhen office, he quit without, like, in a very short notice, and my CEO was trying to hire someone to run the operations here. And it just happened. Like, I actually always wanted to get some experience in China. So I just saw it as a good opportunity. I mean, of course, he asked me, like, you've never worked in China. You cannot even speak Mandarin.
Yeah.
You're not Chinese. And on top of it, I have no manufacturing experience and all, but it was more about, like, making him believe that it's more, I mean, I think, like, when you work in, like, so many different industries, like, thinking on the ground, it's like getting stuff done, like, then having those preconceived notions about, like, what works, what doesn't work. So yeah, I mean, he eventually agreed, and I moved here. Yeah, it was a really good decision.
Yeah,
I loved it. Yeah.
When we were talking back then, which was, let me check out the year, back in, was this 2019?
Yes.
So we talked a lot about marketplace and theory of marketplace and how to solve marketplace, right? Was this for this job, or was it for a different company?
Oh, I think it was for a different company.
Oh, it was for a different company. Okay. Was any of that relevant for the interview process for the studio, or?
No, studio was very different. Studio is, like, it has, actually, maybe yes, maybe, yeah, maybe I think some things were, yeah.
Well, because the reason, like, so for the context for the guests who are listening, for the audience who's listening, I kind of want to get to the point where, we have a lot of practical experience in marketplace, but there's also a lot of theoretical stuff that you read about that you always want to try and apply.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of curious, for San Francisco company, how much of this actually comes up in the interview process, or even for the other company, which I think was an Indian company that was a marketplace too, which is really big, right? Yeah, how much of this actually comes into the interview, which aspects, and is that really relevant? And then especially, I like to know how to connect that to your actual execution work once you're in.
Once you're in, I don't think it works. Theory works. Not at all.
So they just want to see how you think, or, like, why do they bring, like, like, how, all these concepts of what why test you about things that you're never going to be practically using?
I think, I mean, one thing is to, of course, how you think about it, and can you think as a framework, even though you might not apply it, but at least your framework is not fucked up. It's not non-logic. It's not illogical, right? So it needs to make sense. I think that's what they're looking for. In the interview process, it helped a bit, but I would say the interview overall was more about, like, on the spot, like, if this situation happens, then what would you do? The depth, like, it didn't matter what I know or what works doesn't. It's just like, if this this gets fucked up, what do you do? So that's what mattered.
Okay, so
and I think that matters. That helps in on your day-to-day execution.
So would you say the process for interviewing, at least for the studio, it was a good process and it made sense?
Yes, definitely. And I had at least 7 interviews.
Well, 7.
I had.
Okay.
Yes, it was really like a long process. 3 months, 7 interviews, meeting, and 2 case studies. Really long case studies. Yeah.
Okay. And then, so I want to move away from that then. What the studio is solving is very unique for China, because they're holding the world supply in terms of manufacturing, right?
Yeah.
So is their thesis correct? Does it scale very big to a venture company where you're getting like 1,000x? Or I don't know, how do you feel about where it's heading?
I think the products that Studio is doing, like which is their patches and lapel pins, this is like they're really good at. It's a small market. It's not a big market, and they have a good stronghold in it, I must say. So they carved out a good niche, strong market. They did a good job, but it's not something they can rely on for long term. So definitely they need to find out different ways to like get to like go to next level, I would say. And I think that's what we were doing as well within Studio, to scale it to next level for either different kind of products or different way of doing how we are doing it.
So how does So what is the next big thing? How does the world benefit from having access directly to manufacturing from China?
Sorry, repeat your question again.
Right, so because you have to get to the next level, right? Because they have a niche, which is traditionally and technically, theoretically correct, right? So you own the niche. They raised, I think, Series A, like 11 million or something, at least publicly. Yeah. So, but then to get to Series B, it's about I think the revenue at that point, right? So they already have the team is good, the idea is good, the traction is there, right? So now they kind of have to just get to a bigger market. So what is the next thing, and how does the world benefit from having access to direct manufacturing from China?
I'll be honest with you. I think this is the problem that everybody's trying to solve, including Alibaba, and nobody has really solved it. I can talk about like what has changed in last 10 years, then like what opportunity exists. And to be honest, that opportunity I'm trying to solve, I can talk about it later. I'm trying to solve now. Alibaba is trying to do it. Amazon is actually trying to do it. I'm happy to discuss about that. I learned so much about like what everybody's trying to solve, and nobody has really done it. Now, couple of things that has changed for sure is factories have started. It used to be like customers tell us what they need, and factories used to make it. And it did not, like the end quality of the product was not always the perfect. But like customers had to get involved a lot more to come up with a final good product. And what has changed in last 10, 15 years is like now factories are actually coming up with their own product, which is very good quality. And they can actually sell it direct to customers. And because and they are actually at the forefront of trend as well. Like factories have, like in China, they have gotten like so sophisticated in terms of what they can do. Second, they can see what the trend is, like whatever it's going, and they come up with the product like really fast and a really good quality. So what that landscape has changed is like now, rather than thinking factory as a B2B, B2B2C business, which most of the marketplaces did, like Lazada's or Amazon and all. Now, a lot of companies are going direct to customers now. Basically, factories selling direct to customers. So you see a huge surge of direct to consumer startups right now. Like a lot of direct to consumer startups, they've become D2C basically. That's one. Second, Amazon set up their so-called factory onboarding team in Shenzhen in last 5 years, and all they do is like they just sell directly from factories, from products from China to end customers, rather than individual distributors in US. AliExpress is doing something similar.
Every time I order from Lazada, I suspect they don't say it's safe from China, but then it's probably coming from the factory, I bet.
Exactly. Lazada, I mean, all like Lazada, Shopee, and all, like they all are like putting a lot of resources to get onboarding. In fact, in factories now rather than sellers.
Okay.
So I mean that trend has definitely changed. Second, I would say like products have gotten, like I was saying, like you can buy sophisticated products now. By sophisticated, I mean like difficult design, a lot of like turns, paints, stitches, or even tech gadgets and all. So China has gotten like really good at it.
And so I guess what you're saying is the studio kind of falls in this where they're a part of the story. You're trying to solve it. They have their niche, man, but like it sounds kind of scary the way you phrase it. If all the big guys are going for this, either they own that niche and hopefully get acquired, or they somehow could find a solution faster to hop to the next horizontal market to get to more mass and then get acquired. I guess it sounds like that would be the play, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, basically, I don't know if they want to acquire or they want to go like really big, compete against everybody. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, basically big players are trying it, smaller ones are trying it. I can say like, maybe if you try to solve a small niche problem within that big opportunity, which Amazons and Alibabas might have already, then it's probably your likelihood of success is probably more.
Yeah, and then so with this in mind, and I think what we're basically touching upon is next generation e-commerce, right? We're talking about, if you look at terms of penetration of e-commerce and also even internet, I mean, there's still billions and billions of people who need to get on to internet and e-commerce alone, right? So, and I think this is the next evolution, what you're talking about, and what does that mean then in terms of next gen manufacturing? Does China become very capitally intensive and invest all the capex to unlock this further? Or do we start diversifying away from China and it becomes more fragmented? Or do you see China not changing ever and people will always be stuck to China?
Yeah, so I used to come across this thinking a lot as well. It's a very good question to ask. I think for sophisticated products, I don't think outside China anybody has a capacity to do it. But if you're talking about mass like t-shirt, shirts and all, yes, the labor is cheaper outside. They have gotten good as well. Like they can churn out faster products. Yeah. Okay. But I'll add one thing, and super important is that one thing a lot of people should need to remember is end of the day, a lot of raw material actually comes from China. So even if you're manufacturing something in Vietnam or Indonesia or Colombia somewhere, they will probably be sourcing the raw material from China.
China's basically gone full stack, and which is why they have one belt, one road, why they have their feet in Africa, the resources that they need to grow that burgeoning population and to continue to feed the supply chain for their own social contract, right? Okay,
also,
so go ahead.
One thing I'll add is like everything is moving high tech, right? Like batteries are like the most important thing for most of these high tech. Everything is moving portable and all. So China owns more than 70% of world's lithium. So no matter what, you have to rely on China.
Yes, which is probably why Elon needs to be friends with the government there, and why Tesla is quite prevalent in all around China when I visited, right?
Unless there's a new battery technology, then which decouples you from lithium, that's a different story then.
And I guess that's from the perspective of America, that's what hopefully they can unlock. Then they're usually good at that stuff, right? So. So then you lived in India, China, Shenzhen, right? Philippines for a long time, Singapore a little bit, the Silicon Valley a little bit in California. What's your favorite place so far? Oh, Indonesia too.
Jakarta as well. Yeah.
So you've been all over the place. Where's your favorite place and why?
Wow, it's very hard to. So I love living in Shenzhen. I love it here. I liked San Francisco as well. Yeah. I think I liked working in Singapore. I would add working in Singapore, like the kind of people you meet there and all like this. It's just a good hotbed of innovation and all. I like Jakarta and Philippines as well.
You like everything.
And it's just different stage of my life. I would say like now, for me, if you ask me like right now, I think Shenzhen or San Francisco, both are, I like both.
It's the right place to be for your current stage and actually what you're probably trying to solve, right?
Yeah.
What would have shocked you the most so far about China when you first moved over or even now?
Man, it's a fascinating country. I like living here. Like I thought I'll have a lot of friction from language, people maybe not like, I'm maybe not getting as friendly with people or everything would be way more difficult for me. So it was actually surprisingly easy. People were super nice. Everybody's helpful. It was frictionless. And when I was moving here, people were like, man, you're moving to China. Wow. So
it's a lot more international than probably people think, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's one. Second, which was even bigger shock is like, I think China or Shenzhen is probably, in terms of tech, probably 10 years ahead of San Francisco, to be honest. Wow. Like the way everything works. Yeah. And mind you, I'm saying San Francisco, and I'm not saying a tier 3 city in US. I'm saying like one of the top cities in US. So in terms of tech, I think the way everything works here, of course, everybody knows about payments, but that's a really small part of it. Like the way they use facial recognition technology, everything, like it's just miles ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's far more advanced than people realize, I guess. It's also a different universe. Like how do you get along with the different technology ecosystem? Like you can't use Google. You can't use anything. It's like when I visited, man, you're completely off the grid, which is wild. You're just like disconnected from like the rest of the world. Has that been hard to adjust to?
It wasn't hard. To be honest, it wasn't that hard. It was different. But I'll add one thing. So I actually, in January, so this year, January, I went to Turkey just to travel. And I felt life is so different. Like I could use Google, whatever I want. I had to carry a wallet all the time with me, my ID card and all. It felt so different. So
you really became Chinese, man.
Man, I use WeChat stickers pretty well these days. So people say like if you do that, you're real Chinese.
Yeah. So basically, then so like with your experience with China and growing up in India, how would you compare the two different worlds then? Especially for an outsider who has no context of Asia at all.
Yeah. I think there are few commonalities and then there are a lot of differences as well. The commonalities are like you see people are hungry to do something. Like people, like be it India or China, people are not laxed or laid back. They want to do something, make a name for themselves, make a good business. And that comes out of being places being populous and people competing against each other. That's one. I think culturally they are quite similar too, like really like being family oriented. I don't see them that different in that sense. In terms of differences, quite a lot actually. So India is a democratic country, right? Like, so a lot of things are like, it's not a homogeneous country. It has less to do with democracy. It's more about like India is not a homogeneous society. Like you go 100 miles and people speak different language, different food and all. So it's very, very different. Like every mile you go, every 100 mile you go. But in China, yes, it's also quite different actually if you travel between provinces. But still, like at least people speak Mandarin everywhere. So that part is something I see is quite different. And I think China is quite well run. It's very well run, like the infrastructure, technology. Even if you go to tier 2, 3 cities, like things are quite well managed. India can be like really good, like really like not so good. Yeah. So, and that comes from like the way India is and why China is. So that's, I think they both come with their benefits and not so benefits, but that's the difference I see. In terms of like overall, like China is definitely like ahead in terms of like technology and overall like people living standards and all, for sure.
Yeah. And then out of all these places you lived, across Southeast Asia, US, China, where's the place you've experienced the most racism?
I think India.
Your own home country. Which goes back to your point. It goes back to your point about China and how there's some unifying factor with the language, and maybe that's rooted in their history, right? But India, you go a few hundred miles, it's different, right? Just completely different. Is that related?
Yeah, I see. The thing is, Southeast. Yeah, exactly. Like San Francisco has still a lot of Indians. Like, in fact, if you're Indian, you're actually like probably smart, making a lot of money and all that. Like that's the perception they have. Yeah. But I never felt anything in SF. In China, it's not racism, but it's more like, oh, you're a foreigner. So it's not good or bad. It's just
you're always a foreigner. You're outside.
Yeah, it's different. Like people treat you like nicely, but it's like, okay, you're a foreigner. So they try to adjust themselves accordingly, which I actually really appreciate. And I never felt anything like racist, like an anti non-Chinese malice. No, not at all. Even though like India, China has, I don't know the relationship, how is it going? But people have been like, people actually make fun of it. Like, oh, this is happening in India. What do you think? It's people have been like super nice and cool about it. It's fine.
That's good. Like where you got the most discrimination then?
Yeah, I mean, India has their own biases as well. But look, the thing is, I was also young, much younger. So it also depends the stage of you're in. I was less mature about stuffs, and also maybe, I don't know, man. But if you ask me, I remember India as being more racist for me.
I mean, it could have just been personality and
Probably, yeah. Like people in India have things against like North Indians, basically. So that was one. Second is I'm a Bengali, so people think Bengali guys are maybe they're mama boys. They think they're intellectual, smart, but they're boring.
Interesting.
I think,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, being a Bengali maybe not so much, but being a North Indian, if you travel to like South India, I felt like people were trying to judge me and like trying to put me down for some things,
Very, very fascinating. I mean, like, I know in Vietnam you have this distinction between North, Central, and South, but there's still this unifying idea of always being Vietnamese, but they will make fun of each other for it. But it's never like a hard discrimination, I felt, at least, so that's interesting, contrasting experience.
Yeah.
Okay. So the last topic, I kind of set you up for this, if we follow your career, engineer to rocket, getting your feet in entrepreneurship, having a small exit, and then even starting companies that failed, right? And now I guess initially you were a little bit hesitant to talk about this, but I guess on paper, right, you call yourself co-founder of this idea, NEVO?
NEVO, yeah.
NEVO, right?
Yeah.
But of course, what we're going to do is own up to it and say it's nothing right now, but it's like it had some rough and tumble beginnings. But I kind of wanted to walk through your thoughts about how does a founder, an entrepreneur, think about starting a new company, and then also having a company that didn't work out after Rocket, right? And then also now having trouble getting started up. We'll talk about some of your experiences and your thoughts around that, and also in the context of it being in Shenzhen and what you're trying to solve too, which I think is interesting.
So I think what I realized over like last so many years is it's always about the journey and not about the destination. And I just love the journey. I love building things, and I know it hasn't been successful yet. It's okay. Like I just love the process of like building things. Yeah. That's why I want to do this again. The reason I wasn't confident, I didn't want to talk about it is, to be honest, we haven't defined exactly what pain point we are solving, and there's a reason behind it. Back then, it was more about like just getting on the ground, like whatever idea, whatever you have, just invalidate and get off the ground as fast as possible. But like just start scaling. And now I'm being more mindful, and actually, even before I call something as a venture, I'm really trying to like go deeper into customer pain points, taking my time. It doesn't have to be like in next 1 month, I need to raise this money and that money.
Correct.
So yeah, I'm just taking my time, to be honest. I think if you want to build something good, it takes time. If you want to build something sustainable, it takes time. But I feel like a lot of the theory goes around global, like everywhere, is like do fast or break things, make things. Yeah, it makes sense once you have a direction. But before that, don't try to like scale it. Spend your time in finding a direction. So I'm trying to do that right now. And during this whole process, there were some challenges. It was more about co-founder relationships. So because I'm in Shenzhen, like, of course, it makes sense to like have a local partner. And then I have someone, like we were 3 co-founders. I had the third one was actually outside. He was based in Singapore and also San Francisco. And yeah, it was more relationships between us that kind of didn't work out. One got dropped out. The other one, if you want me to talk in detail, happy to talk about it. But basically, 2 co-founders did not get well along together. And even though we started something, and that was a big factor to like go back and forth between who's doing what and where the direction is heading. So one of my learnings has also been like, just go by yourself rather than trying to forming a team first. Just go ahead and people will join you in your journey on the way. And yeah, that's. I mean, Yeah, go ahead.
How long? So you left the studio, and how long have you been in this process of everything you're talking about? How long has it been?
Yeah, actually, when I left studio, I traveled around China for like 3.5 months. I just wanted to take a break. July, August, September.
Of 2020?
Yes, this year.
Okay, so in the past few months, so then you kind of been on this journey of figuring out what you want to do. And I think some important things that you're pointing out, and I don't know. It's a function of because we're older now or we have more experience. But I especially with the podcast and the platform, how I want to develop it, I've had a very much similar approach. Just focus on really, at least for me, focus on really good, high quality first. Engaging content that you really care about. At least make sure you care about it first, and also the guests care about it, and then see what the audience cares about too, right? And it's more about exploring that. Figure out the pain points first and figure out what you want to solve first or talk about first, which is, I think, very important, because I think, especially when you're younger, I mean, there are two ways to solve, ideas or problems, right? You could chase the idea that you think of how the world should be, which could be wrong, right or wrong. You could iterate to nothing if it's, not the right idea, or you just take all the wrong steps. Or if you're lucky, maybe you pivot to the right thing, right? And that's just kind of building up the idea of what you think. The other one is, what you did with Pillow in Space or Reach, right? You found a pain point and you build up from that pain point. Yeah. And, it's the thing. I think what you're saying is, instead of just, especially even though it's tempting, because there's a lot of money now in the market. I think there's too much money chasing too few good ideas, right? There's a lot of people are getting funded, but I don't know where it's going to go. But I think your process sounds right. And I think we talked about this maybe 1 or 2 years ago. But like when you wanted to do like D2C and get it kicked off, being based in Shenzhen, but it's like really taking the time to find out what you want to solve. Is it from a pain point? Talking to actual potential customers based off your hypothesis, right? And then forming something yourself. Or, if you have a co-founder, even better, form it together, but then, no rush, then, like you said, once you have a direction, it definitely makes sense to actually then bring more people on board. Because I remember I was approached by, I won't say names, but like, other friends in the past, they say, come join this idea. Like, but then you have to join and believe the idea. But like, you didn't build anything to convince me, so then of course it's never going to work out when you join a venture this kind of way. Right.
Exactly. Absolutely.
But it sounds like, and I think the other part then is, I would like to hear more about how you think about these kind of founder conflicts, right? On one hand, I think getting that founder foundation is pivotal, especially this early on. Whether you form the idea first or with the team, right? I think both are okay. But then, how did you? It sounds like there was conflicts. What are the conflicts? Is it because of a difficult person, or it's just culture, or what are you seeing? And then how do you think about resolving that and getting it right going forward?
Okay. So there were two reasons. One was clarity on what the end goal looks like. That was different between the other two co-founders.
Why is that so? Sorry, just to cut you off. Why is that so important when it's so early on, though?
So by vision, by clarity of vision, I don't mean like the pain point we are trying to solve, but more like what clarity of vision in like, what am I in it for? Am I in it for to make money?
I see.
Am I in it for to build a venture?
Aligning values, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a better way to put it. Aligning values probably is very important, and it was not aligned, I would say, for one of the person. And yeah.
So that's a very good point then. Like early stage when you're getting co-founders together, when should this conversation happen, or is it a conversation, or how does it come about? I mean, I think a lot of times people luck out because, and a lot of people in podcasts will talk about how you should get a founder. It's like someone you should know from some time, you have some experience with them, from college, them, right? Or something like this. And I think the reason why they suggest that is because your values tend to align better if you've known them for a while, right? So what do you think, though, if at this early stage, you're looking for a local partner, you had another partner who's outside of China, do you need to have an official conversation before you start, or how does that work?
I think, we did have the conversation, but I think like really going deep into like why he's doing what he's doing and why do I really want him for that, that's super important. And I'll add one more thing. I think a lot of time what people tend to do is like they have the wishful thinking. So even though the person tells me, okay, I'm here, I want to make good money, I'm just saying it in a very plain, direct way. But let's say he makes his vision clear to me, but because I want that guy, I try to fit him or her into my whatever
your narrative
place he wants to be. Yeah. So that's very dangerous, I think. I like try to like not have wishful thinking as much as possible. Yeah, and that happens when you like, I mean, I can just say that, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, this theme comes up a lot, especially in entrepreneurship. I was literally talking yesterday with another person who had to have an employee let go, or he left, or some version of it because it was a difficult situation. And my own experience as well, just having difficult situations and people on board. And what happens is, that there is some misalignment, and it's a very painful kind of process where you have to kind of break apart, or things don't work out. But I think it's definitely part of the journey. But I think if you can get to a place where it's well understood beforehand, and if you see it, recognize that you address it right away, it makes things smoother, or at least you cut out the parts where less pain down the road, and you kind of take the losses earlier, right?
Yeah. I would also add, like, don't settle. Don't have a goal of having a co-founder. That's one of the things I'm also like, I'm feeling like the goal should not be to help get a co-founder, but goal should be to like still build your venture, and don't settle. Like if you think something is not aligned, just keep looking for looking for more co-founders. Yeah.
And the other thing I like that you said was, when you're in that difficult situation or with a difficult person, and again, remember, a difficult person is just your perception of that person in that situation, right? They also have probably the same view of you, right? So it's kind of a two-sided thing where you got to get to the middle where there's common ground and understanding, right? But what I like is that what you mentioned that is very important to remember is, when you're in that situation with that difficult person, you don't want to lie to yourself and say like, oh, I need a co-founder, I'm going to keep him on. Or if I give it time, it's going to get better. Or I need to give this person space to develop themselves. It's usually not the case. You need to address it right away. And I think a lot of founders will make that mistake. Instead of not taking it head on, it festers and it'll blow up later, right? So I think that's a very good point you pointed out, that, it's, those biases you have to be aware of, and don't lie to yourself about those situations, right? And it's hard to see the truth because you're always tunnel visions, because you want to have your end goal, and you're trying to fit it to your narrative, which is probably instead of trying to see the actual truth, right? So that's a tough one. So I guess the last question then would be around, informing a new startup. We talked about the people part, at least for early stage in the founders. How do you think about the product and the market, especially in the context of what you're doing now in Shenzhen? So how do you think around forming the product? What should it look like? And then how do you go about thinking, is there a market for this?
So one of my learnings actually from doing my previous startup has always been, don't select an idea, or even if the idea is correct, right? Don't go after an idea, but go after an industry, which for sure is like growing. Then it's very easy for you to pivot within that industry, like whatever you want to do. So I like, for sure, like I was saying, like there has been some trends that's pretty much everybody's trying to solve. So I'm sure like I want to be in that industry. And in terms of product, again, this part is super hard as well. I was initially trying to find products that customers don't, let's say they cannot find on Amazon, and basically coming up with those kind of products. But eventually I realized it doesn't matter if it's on Amazon or not. It doesn't matter if they can find it on Amazon or whatever it is. What matters right now is what pain point the customer is facing, whatever he's doing, whatever kind of product he's trying to buy or do. So I'm going back to the basics and just talking to an ideal customer and collecting all the pain points that can have, that's relevant to that industry, of course. And based on that, think backwards to what kind of product should I come up with?
Okay, so at least in terms of product, right? So you've had some struggles with getting a team together, but I think more or less once you figure out the direction, right? So basically, you're thinking about industry, you're thinking about product, you're talking to customers. At least you will be able to probably bring someone on board eventually. I think the team probably would be good enough with your network and who you know, right? A product is, by being very customer centric, and at least you're building something from something real, or at least something that you could test at something real. So that, say you get the pain points from a customer, you build a little MVP or you build a product for them, and you actually put it in their face. The question is, will they buy it or not, right?
Yeah.
And it's coming, and then then you will see whether or not the customer was actually just saying things, or you got the interpretation wrong. Then you could tweak it again until you probably get to them to actually buy that, and then you probably find the next customer. So that, I guess that's how you can think about forming product, is by being very customer centric and talking to them, and then going back from what you gathered, then designing it, and then moving forward. And then I guess the last piece was, how does this fit? So say you talk to a customer, you form a product, and he's willing to buy it, but how do you know if the market's big enough in the right industry that you're talking about earlier?
I think for me now, I care more about to be honest, I care less about market size right now, because I feel getting from 0 to 1 is the most important thing. I can always like align to go into bigger market, but it's a 0 to 1, no matter how big or small the market is the biggest challenge. And even if it's a small market for me, if I'm able to reach that level, I can figure it out, reaching the bigger market in that sense. And
then I guess, yeah.
The one thing I'll add is it's kind of given, the smaller the market is, less competition you have. The bigger the market is, more competition you have. So both have their positives and negatives, in my opinion. And I personally just tend to favor, I don't know, small or big, how should I call it, but where there's less competition, even if it comes at an expense of small market, I'm okay with that.
I mean, I think what you're saying is, there's a lot of correct things you're saying. Why jump straight into competition when you don't have to? It's possible. But I guess the question of big or small is quite important, because that ties to what is your end goal then, I guess. And I think, how do you think about what you want to achieve out of this? Are you trying to change the world? Are you trying to get money? Are you trying to because then you honestly, then smaller size does matter. If you're trying to get X amount of money where you don't have to worry about it, say your target is $10 million or $100 million, there is such thing as too small and too big, and then you do have to think about it, right? So how do you think around that?
So I definitely want to build something big. I think I still have that many years left that I can think big. Maybe I wasn't able to explain myself clearly.
What I was saying is I think the hardest part is going from 0 to 1, and for me, that's more important than market size, as an early stage. If I reach 1, because I'm playing in an industry that's big enough, that's a fast growing trend and is big market, I can always find ways to go from 1 to somewhere else. Okay,
so I understand what you're saying. So you're operating in a space where it is big enough. And it's just a question of a niche can jump horizontally to within that same space bigger. So I guess what you're saying is you're looking for that niche, but it's not going to be a size where it's impossible to jump, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
How are you sure that that's not going to happen though? Let's say, for example, the studio, right? Mm-hmm. It's impossible for them to pivot away from small merchandising things, and they're forever at that market cap size, or the size of the company, the revenue, or whatever, right? How do you know you're not building something that's where you're going to get stuck, even though it's somewhere related in the ecosystem and space, but you have really no easy way to get to another customer in a different horizontal space or a different way to grow?
I think first, the filter where studio is itself a pretty high success rate. Not a lot of companies who start are not able to reach there. Okay. That's the first filter. So now the second filter is from there where studio is to something bigger. You have a lot less competition, and look, studio is still playing in the game. They have good revenues. Yeah. They actually don't need funding. Whatever they raise, they don't need it. Their revenues are much better. So I would rather be in that position, trying to figure a bigger market where I'm making good revenues, than trying to be in a huge market where the chances of Amazon crushing me is this. Yeah. So again, I'm not saying smaller market is better than bigger market, but what I'm saying is much more important for me to find a market where there's much less competition, even if it comes at the expense of small market size.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's fair. That's fair enough. So kind of to recap, the way you think about, so we talked about people, your team, the co-founders, the product, how you think about getting to a product, and whether that scales into a market is that it just has to be a big enough niche, essentially what you're saying. And that niche, if you can get to a niche that's something like the studio, that where the niche is big enough, it's not going to be a niche where you only stuck at 100,000 revenue and you can't even do anything, right? You're probably targeting a niche where it'll be big enough where it's comfortable, and then you could figure out what to do from there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair. And then I guess the last question then, after all of this experience and time and we're getting older, the last question would be, what do you do what if NEVO fails this time? You spend 5 years and it fails.
I think my goal with NEVO is to of course, build something, but if it doesn't work out, my second best bet is to build a sustainable business within NEVO, which just makes money.
Yeah.
I don't have aspirations to become a super rich person. So it's okay. If it makes decent money, then I'm equally happy. If I cannot even do that, 5 years, man. Gotta feed my kids. So probably do consulting, maybe find a job if nothing works out. We'll see.
Probably the worst case, yeah. I guess if you needed money, you could get a job. But then how will you know when to call it quits then?
Sorry, repeat that again?
So how do you know 5 years is too early? How do you know when to call it quits then?
See, I wouldn't say it quits. I might go back to job, work there for some time, maybe put money in my kids' raising and all. Man, I can do again in 40s. It's fine.
Okay. So keep rolling the dice essentially.
Yeah, like I said, for me, it's about the journey. It's fine. I didn't build anything. I'm not gonna die. I'm not gonna feel bad about it. But I just enjoy the process.
I think that's the correct attitude. One, you're going to be happy. Two, it takes a long time to, if it's a traditional business or even it's venture return, it takes a long time to extract that value, right? And you do need to go on a journey to get there. And just because, the first 5 times it didn't work out, eventually, if you keep improving yourself and being consistent, you probably hit upon something, whether it's a profitable business or a successful venture, right?
Yeah.
So I think at the end of the day, that's the correct attitude, and at least you're going to be happy doing it, right?
I personally think, even if, let's say what is success, right? Let's say I become a unicorn, right? Then what's next? Then there's decacorn. Then you do this.
Yeah,
so
correct.
It's always moving up, right? So again, it's more about the journey than your destination will keep changing all the time.
For sure. And I think that's a very good way to look at it. And I think for the younger audience, maybe to also, or maybe the older audience, maybe to change their mindset. I think it's a much healthier place to be. And I think, you shared from your routine to your journey to how that's transforming now. So definitely appreciate your sharing and your time. Before we close, is there anything you want to plug? Should we be following anything you want to share or we should know about?
Yeah, feel free to connect me on LinkedIn, Rajan Devnath. I'm actually, like I said, I'm exploring stage, definitely happy to talk with people, what are they doing? What are the pain points? But I always like to connect with people. So of course that's there. If anyone wants to join me on the co-founding journey, I'm happy to talk about it. I don't see it as we can just exchange ideas, what pain points do you see and all, super happy to talk about it. Yeah, that's all right. Basically.
Sounds good. I'm very excited for your next journey and where that leads you in the next few years. I think you will definitely find success. You've been accumulating experience and, you've been reinvesting it, and it's going to compound and hopefully give you some good returns in the future, one way or the other.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Thanks. I really enjoyed it. Good questions as well. It also kind of brings the memories back and refreshes, redefines what you're trying to do and all, it reminds you of those things. So it was awesome chatting with you.
All right. Thanks, Rajan.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Hey, listeners. Thanks for listening to another episode of EOA. As usual, if you enjoyed this episode and learned something, please share it with your friends and family. Spread the love, share the joy. Help write a review on your podcast app platform, as it helps us a lot. So what did we learn today? Initially, when I asked Raj to speak, he was a bit hesitant. I suspect he felt he didn't co-found the next big thing, hadn't raised a lot of money, or had something valuable to share, which was far from the truth. A lot of my peers, after 10 years of being a part of big venture building or scaling, or even late-stage tech companies, are taking a step back and re-evaluating what they believe in, and clarifying their philosophy, and seeing how to manifest it in whatever project, idea, or problems they wish to solve next. Many people still live for the ideals of others and feel the incessant need to signal or to live or be a certain way. I need to raise the next round. I need to have the best VC brand invested in me. I need to have a unicorn. While there's nothing wrong with these ideas in itself, it's important to understand the underlying motivation driving them. For when things don't go your way, which is certain at some point in the startup journey, what's the true grit that will get you through beyond these signals? I think Raj's turmoil in starting a new venture and having founder troubles and being able to share them is powerful and authentic. His paced approach in finding a new problem to solve is healthy, with a simple, noble goal of making a small profit first before anything else is smart. In due time, with a good process and a good philosophy and continued shared growth with the best minds, we will see NEVO, his latest venture, bloom into something valuable regardless. See you guys back here for next week's episode. EOA out.